Hello, it's Parm King, the Dungeon Master for Legends of Barovia, and today's DM tip is about setting expectations for your player. I have been spending some time on Reddit and Discord, and I noticed quite a few posts with game masters and DMs having some issues with some players. I've responded to a few of them, but I notice a common thread in there, and that is they haven't really set the level of expectations at the beginning of the game, and what happens, problems start to arise later in the game. Now, before we get started, I just want to mention that as a dungeon master, a game master, you really need to spend some time pre-planning and pre-prepping before you even start looking for players to play in your campaign. Now, I spent about a month planning for Curse of Strahd, reading through the book, reading through the rules, putting my own home brew together, and then starting outlining my expectations for the players that I wanted to have. Rushing in and just starting to look for players right away, if you don't do that, well, you're not really going to get the kind of player group that you're looking for. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about setting expectations. Now, what you've done, first of all, is you've gone ahead and planned for your campaign. You've bullet pointed all the things you're looking for, and now you're going to hang your shingle out. Whether it's going to be on Reddit or whether you're going to be doing in a Discord channel, you're going to be looking for players. And what you want to do is keep this simple. This is kind of your sales pitch to catch some of those people that are looking for a game to become interested in your game. Now, we call this LFP, or looking for players. Now, you can either post this right there in some of the Discord channels. I know Foundry, for instance, has a channel for that. There's Reddit channels. So what you're doing is you're looking for players, and you're going to be setting the expectations right at the beginning. Now, the first thing you want to name is what is your campaign, what kind of rule set you're using, and whether you're using any homebrew rules. In my particular campaign, it's just Curse of Strahd, D&D 5e with some homebrew. The next thing you want to do is make sure you include the date and time, include the time zone. I don't know how many times I see it, whether it's on Reddit or Discord, they have date and time, but they don't tell you the time zone. Now, if you're living in California and your game master is in London, and he says 6 p.m., you guys are never going to be able to connect. So make sure you include time zone. The next thing is, how many players are you looking for? Do you want to have an intimate session with only 2 or 3 players, or are you going to have a good party with maybe 5, 6, or even 7 players? Make sure you include player experience. Are you looking for new players, or are you okay with new players, or are you looking for some people that already have some experience? What kind of play style is your game? Is it going to be more role-playing game, or is it going to be combat heavy? Put a percentage in there. Maybe we're doing 70-80% role-playing with only 30 to 20% of combat. Setting those expectations right away, know what kind of game the players are going to be getting into. Make sure you clearly define player etiquette. Is this going to be a game that's going to have some adult content and adult themes, or is it going to be more geared towards kids, where you're going to, you don't want to have curse words, and the themes and topics are going to be more kid friendly. You may also include a particular group or language. Perhaps you're Italian and you only want to play with Italians who speak Italian in your game. Or perhaps you're a bunch of school teachers and you're looking for other school teachers to play with because you have this common bond. Or perhaps you're a veteran or in the armed forces. Or perhaps you're in the LGBT community and you want to include those people in there, so that there's this common frame of expectations and common shared experiences. Remember, this is your game. You set those expectations, the kind of players you're looking for, their experience, the role playing, where they're from. In my particular game, I'm fortunate I have players from all over the world, from Egypt to Canada, England, Ireland, and Germany. So we have a really eclectic, really interesting, cultural diverse group, and it really brings some fun and exciting elements to the game. Mention about yourself in there just briefly as a game master, how many years of experience you have playing, how many years of experience you have as a game master. And the most important section in there, really bold, is if you're interested, click on read more. Now, read more is going to either take them to a blog post that you've made, or a document on Google Docs, or perhaps your Discord channel that's really going to get into the details. Remember, this LFP post is your shingle, it's your sales pitch, it's your elevator pitch. It should just be bullet points and simple. And if they're interested from these bullet points, they click on read more, and that's going to take them to the details of the game. Now, in your read more section, you want to have a lot of details about the game, the rules, the campaign, player expectations, etiquette, more information about you, so they can really say, hey, I was interested in the shingle. Is this really going to be the right game for me? Now, here are some of the rules that I think are important to include. You don't have to, but some of the things that I think is important is about being on time, no show, no call. Now, we as dungeon masters and game masters put a lot of effort into this. If people can't show up on time, or if they're not going to be able to show up, you're probably not going to want them to be in there, and just put it in there right at the beginning. I expect, stellar attendance. We're putting a lot of work in this, and if one person doesn't show up on time or doesn't show up, it really hinders the play for everybody else. I mean, we're only allotting a certain amount of time. We're putting and dedicating some time and allocating a schedule to do this. Just make sure they're on time. Perhaps it's because I'm past the half century mark that I don't just tolerate this behavior, but I just put this in there. I don't have time for it. If you can't bother to be there, then I'm sorry. I like to think of role playing as like a play in a theater production. I'm the producer, the director, the writer. I'm playing all the ancillary figures, and the stars of my show are you, the players. And when the curtain goes up, you better be on stage ready to perform. And if you're not on stage, then we're not really performing, right? So make sure they're on time. One of the things that's also important to include in your rules are game rulings. You might come across a rule lawyer type player, and right in the middle of the session, you might call something that's different. You need to set the expectations. You're the referee. You're going to make a call. Sometimes it might not be rules are written or even your homebrew rules because of the context of the situation or the narrative. Sometimes you make a mistake. What you want to make sure is they understand is I'm going to make a call as the game master. It might be wrong, sure, but we're going to move on anyway. And after the game, rules lawyers are great for after the game session to say, hey, that particular rule, I didn't like how you rule on. Great, let's talk about it. Let's figure out what it is so what doesn't happen next time. But you don't want to slow down the progress of the game. Now, if you're in theater or familiar with being in theater, my mother used to direct and write plays, and I had been in theater before. There's times on stage when you forget your lines and you just improvise. You don't stop and ask for a line when you're in a live show. That's the same thing the way I look at in the session. We're not going to stop, argue over rules, and kind of break that narrative or break that stream, that flowing stream of this role-playing experience. Make sure you really highlight in here etiquette. I mean, if you have a kid-friendly game, you want to hit them hard right there. Is I won't tolerate certain behavior or language because we have some young adults or children playing in this game. Or perhaps you're including some adult content. There might be some scenarios or scenes that might be offensive in there. Make sure you include that in there. And don't hesitate and be afraid to put it in there because you'd rather let them know beforehand because maybe it's not the game for them. Make sure to mention metagame. Metagame is when we as players know something. Maybe we know something about a particular character or NPC, or maybe we know a little bit about the campaign, and we act on it through our player character. I've done this many times just unconsciously and catch myself. We're all hypocrites. We all do this sometimes. And you need to make sure that they understand what it is and how you deal with it. In my game, I usually just say, hey, meta, or another player will say it, and we all know, we'll back off, oh, my mistake. I mean, nobody in our game is doing that intentionally and they're conscious of it, but make sure that they're conscious of it. The next thing to do is player responsibilities. Tell your players what they are responsible for. Learning the rules. If you have a new player, make sure to say, hey, you're a new player. We'd love to have you on board. Before you do anything, go to D&D Beyond, read the SRD, read about some of the characters and players. Here's a couple of links. Get familiar with the VTT platform and Discord. I'm going to set a date before the game starts so that you and I can spend some private time answering any questions about game rules or mechanics or the system. So, I'm always happy to help those who help themselves. They need to take on some responsibility and be accountable for learning some things. You don't want to start session one and they go, okay, what is the D20 again? Or I don't understand what skill check is. If that happens in your game, that means you didn't set expectations and you didn't take the time to send that new player to places where they can learn about it and spend some time helping them before the game. So make sure your players know what they're responsible for and what they're accountable for. The next thing in there is the Brown M&Ms, adding a player rider to your read more section. Now this is a really fun story, it's an interesting story, and it's something that I recommend that you include. I mean, as you're running games and you're looking for players on the internet to play in your games, this is going to help weed out potential problem players. Now, what is the Brown M&M story? Well, there's a rock band known as Van Halen that used to do these huge tours around the world, these huge stages with speakers and lighting rigs. And some of these speakers and lighting rigs are heavy, 200, 300, 400 pounds. And Van Halen would set a contract for the venue with details about safety and setting up these big equipment and speakers and lighting, because it was dangerous. Some of these speakers could fall on the audience if they weren't rigged correctly, or even on the band, or things might not work. And in this detailed contract, there was one item that they would have to check off, and that is the venue would have to put a bowl of M&Ms in a glass bowl and remove all the brown M&Ms from the glass bowl in the green room, or in the dressing room for the band. And somebody had caught on to this and said, oh, this is just, arrogant rock stars making crazy demands of people. And Eddie Van Halen was interviewed about it, and he said, no, I actually put it in there because our stage equipment needs to be rigged safely. It can be dangerous if a 300-pound speaker falls on the audience, or a lighting or something, or on the band. I mean, they need to be responsible and accountable to make sure they rig the stage properly. And when I show up at the venue and I go into the dressing room, if I don't see that glass bowl of M&Ms with no brown M&Ms, I know they didn't read the contract thoroughly. They didn't pay attention to detail. As a Navy veteran, I fully understand the attention to detail. And this meant, oh no, we have to go out there, and now we have to go through and inspect everything, making sure every nut and bolt is super tight, because they didn't even bother to read through this. So it's a way to check to do that. Now, how can you incorporate our player rider into your read more section? Well, put something in your read more section that's kind of fun. If you're interested in this game, please contact me, and make sure to include the response, "Don't down with the trolls," or whatever you want to use. Now, when you get your responses, and you'll get quite a few of them, I got quite a few. If it doesn't have that "down with the trolls," or whatever that phrase is, or that rider that you've put in there, the player didn't bother to read thoroughly and read through the read more section. You're going to get a lot of people that are just going to go and respond to 6 or 7 of them at once, saying, hey, I just want to play a game. Hey, there's a group, there's a game. Yeah, I want to play your game. Well, I want to play your new game. You want to make sure that they read through this stuff. And so this is just it's not a trick, but it's to ascertain the level of responsibility and accountability of your player. Did they take the time to read through this? Meaning that, hey, I know what to expect. I've read through it, and yeah, this is a game I want to participate in. So it's something you can do, include it in there, and it'll help weed out your potential problem players. Now, session 0 is your second level of expectations. You weeded it out. You found those players that are going to fit within your particular game and play style. It's a group of players that you think it's going to be really good and work together. And in your session 0 is you want to spend this as one-on-one time with your players. Now, they should have already known the rules. They should have gone through everything right now. And you're just going to go through rolling your character with them, reviewing some of the rules, making sure that they understand all the expectations, answer questions. Now, be considerate. They may have some requests, but don't be afraid to say no to requests. I say that and make this really important at this stage is because they've seen your shingle, they've read through the read more section, they're all getting ready. You're going through session 0, and if they're going to ask to make some significant change or make some significant request, you need to say no now. And it's easier to say no now, because if you don't say no now, by session 5 or 6 or 7, when they ask for something that's far breaking the context of your narrative or the rules or expectations, it's going to be harder to say no later. This is all about communication, and that's really what role playing is. So make sure that you're with your players. Now, if you want to do your session 0 with your players online, you can do it through Discord, share screen. Maybe they're on D&D Beyond or in your Foundry platform. They can go ahead and roll. There's so many third-party modules so you can roll and do this all together. I like to do this with each of my characters separately. In addition, it helps me really understand the character, the backstory and that particular play style of the character. You can really ask them one-on-one, okay, you're playing the druid. How do you want to play this druid? Tell me a little bit about your family, because I want to weave part of that player backstory narrative into my campaign to help give them more agency in the game. Now, at the end of my sessions, you should always have a little session recap. Did they enjoy it? What they like? What they didn't like? Just review it. You want to get some feedback from your players to improve your skill. And at the same time, you want to maybe, there's a time where you might want to remind the players of certain things. Now, really, setting expectations is all about communications. If you haven't seen the great movie Cool Hand Luke starring Paul Newman, you should. One of the famous lines in that movie is, "What we have here, boy, is a failure to communicate." That's my horrible impression. It's a great movie, but that was one of the common themes of the movies was setting expectations and communications. Digging a hole, boss. That's another line from the movie. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this really helped you and get you comfortable by setting expectations for your players in your game. This is Parm King, and may all your rolls be critical 20. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.